Howdy, 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 my name is Sasuke. Welcome back to Let's Read the SCP Foundation Wiki. Still haven't thought of a faster way to say that, because I feel like SCP-FW might be actually a little bit more time. Anyway, before I continue with the Time Crow Wave, I was asked to read The Young Man because it gives a possible explanation to what the Old Man is, whom we don't really need to see the picture of again, but let's look at it anyway. Okay, so nobody could like Corporal Lawrence. That's not to say that nobody tried, or that he was somehow unfriendly, merely that he was one of those few that seemed to be wired differently. However, in the trenches of World War I, normalcy was at best a relative term, and one that had minimal relation of life, such as it was. Lawrence fought, listened to orders, and didn't disrupt the other soldiers, and that was all that was required. So what if people felt increasingly uncomfortable around him? In a place where the flesh rotting off your bones while you were still alive was the baseline of concern, a little personality conflict ranked several levels below a paper cut. Lawrence, for his part, dealt with it as he always had, as to say, remained totally unaware of the avoidance. The same way a man blind from birth cannot mourn the memory of color, Corporal Lawrence couldn't bemoan a lack of company. He was quiet, as he had nobody to talk to, and still, as he had nothing to do for long stretches of time. The enemy trench less than a mile away had gone silent for several days, letting boredom and nervousness sink in even more than normal, coupled with the unease that seemed to radiate off of Lawrence like heat waves. The worst part was that there was no distinct reason to dislike the corporal. He was a plain man, average height, average build, bland of voice and action. Nobody could recall him raising his voice in joy or anger. He did have the occasional odd mannerisms, however, or mannerisms. He tended to stare a beat or two longer than was acceptable at people. He rarely slept as well, and his bunkmate said that he would mumble in his sleep almost constantly. The content of these nocturnal ramblings, when they could be understood, were often odd and potentially unsettling. One private moved to another barracks when he heard the name of his daughter pass Corporal Lawrence's lips, followed by a bubbling, muffled giggle. It was strongly theorized that he was sent over the trench by his commanders more out of a desire to have him away than for his minimal combat skill. He and 14 of his fellows were sent across the nightmarishly scarred waste of the no man's land between the trenches to reconnoiter the enemy trench and secure it if possible. Many seemed to hope that Lawrence would have the opportunity to prove his devotion to his country by making the ultimate sacrifice for it. That's rude. It was while he was gone, that 3-day gap as the men held their breath waiting for a surprise volley of shells, that someone started asking questions. Whereas before it was almost taboo to speak of Corporal Lawrence since the departure of both him and his aura, rumors seemed to descend with the passion of the denied. Nobody remembered him ever talking of home. No sweet-smelling letters came, no soggy dirt-streaked letters left. He mentioned his dreams often, and griped sometimes with the men over missed foods or pleasures, but never any real passion. Questions started to float among even the higher levels of command. Nobody was able to actually find his station orders. He'd come in with a squad of reinforcements transferred from France, but there was no paperwork. The rest of the reinforcement squad had never seen the man before he'd been lumped in with them the night before the trip, along with the snips and scraps of other squads decimated by the Germans. Whispers filtered among the grunts of the corporal being a curse. Nearly every man who'd shared a bunkhouse with him had gotten trench foot, and the rooms he'd haunted always seemed to smell more musty and sickly sweet even for the trench. The men sent over the no man's land with Corporal Lawrence heard and cared for none of this. Just another man among many, all with death certificates waiting a stamp that could fall at any moment. They moved fast and low, from crater to crater, slipping over slick mud and barbed wire, the only thing that seemed to grow in that blasted waste. Charging the last spurt and into the trench, they were greeted not with the harsh bark of German orders and rifles, but a dense, close silence. Preparing for ambush, the men started to filter out into the tunnels and halls of the trench. The men, already nervous, were not calmed by their investigation. The trenches stank of mold, sweat, and a thin undertaste of rotten fruit. A vile, cloying slime seemed to have pooled in every divot and crack, sticky as glue and itchy on the flesh. In a world where rats and insects would try to snatch food from your mouth even as you ate, they saw nothing alive, not so much as a fly. An armory lay in chaos, munitions spilled on the ground, rifles tossed like pickup sticks. A mess hall had been reduced to ruins, the tables and chairs piled in the center of the room, charred and twisted, their rations seemingly stamped into the dirt by many feet. And still, nothing, dead or alive, was found by the increasingly anxious soldiers. Private Dixon found the first body and managed to cry out before vomiting. They knew it had been a man only because nothing else of that size could have been there. It lay on the floor of the barracks. The entire floor. The flesh of it had been smeared somehow, spread like butter over the rough dirt floor. Bones, already looking pitted and rotten, stuck out at random angles like dead trees in a still swamp. The skull rested on one of the high bunks facing the doorway, 10 gleaming white fingertip bones crammed into the cracked eye sockets. As one man went to examine it, he found the back of the skull had been crushed open, the rotting, sagging sponge of a tongue stuffed into the otherwise dry cavity. More remains were found, each seemingly more unsettling and strange than the last. A ring of hands and a sandbagged watch post, 10 of them, fingers interlaced like a basket, the wrist ragged and broken. 2 men in a tunnel, skin leathery and thin as mummies, eye sockets staring and empty, mouths locked and possibly wide, their clothes mirror rags under an oily black scum. The latrine sent even the hardiest back, gagging and shivering, overflowing with excrement and offal. Goblets of meat bobbed and oozed in the foul sludge, the whole surface dotted with what looked like thousands of clean, slick eyeballs, nerves and tendons fanning out like goldfish tails. Corporal Lawrence was the first to find the hole, the other men loudly debating the better part of valor and their rapid withdrawal from the nightmare trench. It was small, and a section of fresh digging, the first of a new arm of trenches projecting closer to the enemy lines. No fewer than 4 feet across, it seemed to be the accidental uncovering of a natural chamber, the empty blackness of it defying investigation. Private Dixon, recovered and blessedly numb from his previous ordeals, saw the corporal prod the edge with his boot, then crouch to peer in, then suddenly slide in head first before the private could so much as utter a shout of question. The private was a good soldier, and rushed to the perceived distress of his fellow. When questioned later, he could provide little illumination as to what happened over the 2 minutes Corporal Lawrence spent in the hole. He could see nothing. The light of a torch seemingly gobbled up a few feet into that dense blackness. There were sounds. The rustle of movement over loose stone or rubble. An odd liquid shifting, a dry rustle that made him think of the insect husks he used to collect in the summer. Probably cicadas. As he shouted for aid, there was a sudden upwelling of a repulsive stench like a reptile house gone sour and old, and his fellow soldiers found him retching helplessly beside the hole when they came around the turn. It was as they rushed to Private Dixon's aid that the hand emerged from the hole. They stopped and raised rifles as one body, roaring for the owner of that pale, trembling hand to identify itself. As they watched, another hand joined the first, followed by the pale, shivering head of Corporal Lawrence. He was streaked and smeared with a tarry black ooze, hacking and coughing thinly as he hauled his body up beside that of the gasping private. As they moved to help the man, the corporal vomited up a heavy stream of the same repulsive slime that coated his body in smears and globs, his curled, shuddering body voiding more of it into his saturated, fouled pants. They were hesitant to touch him, finally doing so after the seemingly endless river of grime stopped pouring from him. He was insensible, eyes rolling and wide body as limp as a boned fish. The men quit the trench with all speed. Half dragging the corporal, they ran with no thought to cover or death, only escape. They were crossed in record time, falling into their home trench like so much cordwood, gasping and shivering, one man known to have bludgeoned a German to death with a brick, curled on the floor in a sobbing heap. The commanders moved quickly, isolating the men and trying to calm the most lucid for a report. What spilled out would have been immediately dismissed as lies and hallucinations were it not for the earnest, pleading stares of those reporting. Command calmed them with explanations of battle fatigue and strange gas weapon tests, and shared silent, focused stares as the cowed men were ushered out. Corporal Lawrence had little to report. Of his time in the hole he could, or would, say little. He stated that he had slipped and fallen into what may have been some long-blocked underground pool, or perhaps a buried latrine. Of the sounds and smells reported by the private he had nothing to say, only that he had struggled a short time, then managed to get back out as the men arrived. Truly, he seemed none the worse for the wear. In fact, he seemed better in sprints than many had remembered ever seeing him, favoring the commanders with a wide, giddy smile, or better spirits, favoring the commanders with a wide, giddy smile as he was dismissed with a warning not to discuss the events. The corporal proved a changed man over the next few days. He was more talkative, but quickly had men wishing for his old unsettling silence. He rambled about the joys of closed spaces, of creation and destruction that seemed to spring up all around them. About human pleasures missed, the dimensions and ages of which made some men threaten Corporal Lawrence with a quiet and ignoble death, which only seemed to stretch the near constant smile on his face even wider. Private Dixon, one of the corporal's bunkmates, whispered to a friend that he had woken once to find the corporal standing over him in the night, his eyes as bright and flat as silver dollars. They found the private the next day snarled in the barbed wire, his intestines spread nearly 10 feet around him in every direction. Not one man from that trench survived the Great War, although few died in battle. A wave of sickness took the trench a few days after Private Dixon's death. A strange wasting sickness, it seemed to eat the flesh like acid. Men waking to find previously healthy flesh eaten down to the bone, oozing and blackened. A sergeant was found in a latrine beset by a living carpet of rats. They refused to quit the body even when shot, and attacked several men before the body was recovered. Relief finally came, the bulk of the men being sent to various hospitals, many wasting away before they ever reached a bed. Corporal Lawrence was remanded to a French mental ward, transferred after several complaints from the hospital proper where he was first sent. It seemed his behavior hinted at growing mental imbalance, culminating with an attempted sexual assault of a nurse, which ended with the loss of 3 fingers from her right hand and the vision in her right eye. The corporal would rant quietly to the other patients, whisper about endless halls, pursuits in the dark, flesh laid out like the pages of a book. It was dismissed as so much war fatigue, even as his behavior grew less violent and more unsettling. He vanished several times from the ward, only to appear several hours later as if nothing had happened. When pressed, he would begin to sing My Bonnie Lies Over the Sea in an endless monotone until the doctors left exasperated. Others on the ward clamored to be transferred from the whispering madman. A stale, musty foulness seemed to sit in the air wherever he stayed, and incidents of infection and the strange, consuming sickness that had beset his home trench seemed to follow him like a cloud. Numerous attempts were made to transfer the man, only to be met with bureaucratic confusion. No records were found of the man, no entry papers, commendations, or incidents, not even a birth certificate. Through it all he sat for hours on end cross-legged on his bed, occasionally humming tunelessly, or rambling off the names of his ward mates between short, bubbling giggles. Corporal Lawrence and 18 men vanished one November night, between a 5-minute nurse rotation at 3 in the morning. The room reeked of rust, oil, mold, and sweet rot. Thick black swaths of crumbling ooze coated the beds and several of the walls. Wide patches of it smearing and eating into the floor. Of the men there was no sign at first. As they searched, one nurse shifted a bed aside, only to shriek and nearly trip across one of the sunken, reeking depression of the floor. And a tight, perfect spiral where there appeared to be hundreds of teeth. Perfect spiral where what appeared to be hundreds of teeth resting neatly on the floor. After counting, they accounted for the total of all the teeth of every living soul in the ward, but one. The corporal was never found, nor were the men. The incident was swallowed by the constant barrage of horrors from the front and forgotten with ease. Stories of a cursed trench wandered across the front lines, often squelched for being bad luck. Still they came, stories of strange deaths of disappearing men, found days later alive but broken and twisted beyond comprehension. Stories of a strange dark figure stalking the bomb-riddled towns of Europe. This may be the only known image of Corporal Lawrence ever recorded, taken several days after his return from the hole in the German trench. And let's go back and look at the picture of the creepy ooze creature. And let's go and look back at the creepy picture of... Yeah, that's him. Godspeed, Corporal Lawrence. Okay, so, moving on. Now it's time for the Time Crowave! If I had some sort of, echo software, I would totally have used it. Just like, Time Crowave! Wave! But I don't have software for that. All I can do is pretend. So, 119 is to remain open and unplugged at all times except during testing. The door to the room in which 119 resides is to be locked for all periods except during experimentation, with the entry codes given only to authorized research and security personnel. An industrial-grade disinfectant will be available nearby at all times, and the inside of 119 is to be heavily disinfected before any testing. The contents of 119 are to be monitored through the viewing window on 119 at all times during testing, and will be stopped immediately should the contents become hostile or otherwise damaging to 119. What do they put into the microwave? Okay, so, SCP-119 is a Panasonic redacted microwave oven. What could they possibly have redacted from that? It's just a microwave. Panasonic microwave oven. What did they need to redact from that? It was initially discovered by an agent who bought it from a liquidation sale of all the assets from Blank Valley Vineyards. It is believed that Blank Valley Vineyards was using the anomalous properties of 119 to rapidly age its products and create expensive vintages. Records show Blank Valley Vineyards making under-the-table sales of vintages dated back as far as 19-something, many years before the company's inception in 2005. These sales are what led to the lawsuits accusing the company of falsifying product information and other forms of fraud, which eventually caused Blank Valley Vineyards to declare bankruptcy. Kinda like Toys R Us is going to do later this week, apparently. 119 appears to be a standard model of microwave in all respects except that the magnetron unit does not produce microwave radiation. Instead, the magnetron emits a previously unknown type of radiation that accelerates time. The amount of time is accelerated is based on the time input given at the start and the power level setting. The time input allows for 3 digits and there are 5 power level settings. On power level 1, the number of seconds input equals the number of seconds experienced within the microwave. The timecrowave. Therefore, an input of 30 seconds will cause the microwave to run for 30 seconds, at the end of which the object will have aged 30 seconds. Each subsequent power level past 1 causes an exponential increase in the acceleration of time. At power level 2, with an input of 30 seconds, the microwave will run for 30 seconds and the contents will have aged 900 seconds, 15 minutes, or 30 by 30 seconds. At power level 5, with an input of 999 seconds, the microwave will run for 999 seconds, and the contents will have aged 31,529,964 years. Experimentation with the other buttons on the microwave have not resulted in any anomalous properties, although they do still function as would be expected from a normal microwave. The Minute Plus button, for example, adds 60 seconds, and the defrost function prompts the user to open the door and flip the contents periodically. Pressing the Minute Plus button during operation, however, does not recalculate the adjusted time acceleration, merely causing the contents to age at the pre-calculated rate for another 60 seconds, e.g. power level 2 for 30 seconds would age for 900 seconds, 15 minutes. Input of Minute Plus will result in the microwave running for 90 seconds and aging the contents 2700 seconds, 45 minutes, or 3 by 3 times 3, instead of aging the contents for 8100 seconds, 135 minutes, or 90 by 90. 119 can be dismantled, and replacement parts can be substituted for every component except the magnetron. When placing the magnetron in any other microwave, including duplicates of the same model, the magnetron continues to exhibit time acceleration. However, replicating the effects of anything above power level 2 have failed in every model except the original microwave in which the magnetron was found. Although 119, like all standard microwave models, will normally only function when the door is closed, during deconstruction it was determined that disabling the closing mechanism allowed the device to work while open. Subsequent testing determined that the radiation emitted from 119 has a fallout pattern very similar to the microwave radiation it replaced. However, further experiments operating 119 while open now require the approval of clearance level 4 personnel. Addendum. After subsequent testing, it has been determined that the accelerated time experienced within 119 is not accelerated from the perspective of those being affected, instead causing the occupants to perceive that they are simply staying inside of the microwave for the adjusted duration. Should living creatures be exposed to 119 for extended durations, they could quite quickly die of starvation, as they will require as much sleep and food as they would outside of 119. Therefore, further experimentation with living beings now requires the approval of a clearance level 4 personnel. Furthermore, due to the possibility of microorganisms undergoing accelerated evolution within 119, industrial-grade disinfectant has now been added to the containment procedure for 119. Let's check out that testing log. Test log 119. Cup of lukewarm coffee for 60 seconds at power level 1. Agent attempted to reheat his coffee. Microwave activated and ran for 1 minute. Coffee was still cool upon removal. 60 seconds, power level 4. Agent increased power level, assuming the first setting was too weak. Microwave activated and ran for 1 minute. Upon opening the door, Agent discovered his coffee had grown a thick layer of mold and scum consistent with the amount that would be expected from leaving a cup of coffee out for 5 months. At this point, the agent brought the microwave to the attention of the Foundation. Contents, stopwatch. 30 seconds at power levels 1 through 5. Series of tests conducted to determine the effects of various power levels on time fluctuation. Resulting time on stopwatch was 30 seconds, 15 minutes, 7 hours and 30 minutes, and 9999999. There was no result for the last test as the battery had died. Subsequent tests using a more powerful stopwatch with a larger display resulted in 9 days, 9 hours, and 281 days, 6 hours for the last 2 settings. Contents, Lab Rat. Power setting 4. Testing had expected the subject to age 5 months. Upon starting the timer, subject became a blur, barely visible in its rapid movement around the container. At 3 seconds, subject ceased all movement. At 5 seconds, subject began rotting rapidly. Testing was halted at 10 seconds, and SCP-119 is cleaned of excrement and remains of subject. Cause of death was determined to be dehydration. Common lab rat. Small cage with lining, external automatic food water dispenser filled with 5 months of food and water attached to tubes and routed through air vent. Time input 60, power level 4. Upon starting the timer, subject became a blur, rapidly moving throughout his cage. Both the food and water supplies drained from their containers rapidly. At 60 seconds, subject was found to be dirty due to its unclean cage, but otherwise fine. 119 cleaned. Examination revealed subject to be in poor health due to its living conditions in the unclean cage, but with no abnormalities. Contents: 1 liter of water in a shallow glass bowl. Temperature in room containing 119 lowered to 1 degree Celsius. Time input 600, power level 5. Time inside SCP-119 intended to be approximately 24.7 years, with an initial input of 60 seconds. Test intended to determine the difference of atmosphere and heat transfer between the inside and outside of 119 as demonstrated by the evaporation of water at near freezing temperatures. The research assistant entering the time added an extra 0, which would bring the total time up to 2,465,753 years, or over 4,000 years a second. Upon pressing start, an immense amount of air began to cycle through the vent. The assistant immediately recognized his mistake and opened the door to stop the timer, at which point a wave of bluish spores emitted from 119 and onto the assistant. The assistant began to choke and quickly asphyxiated. Subsequent testing on atmospheric conditions revealed low oxygen and high carbon dioxide levels, as well as elevated levels of sulfur. The spores were found to be an unknown xerophilic species of mold. Within 119 was a dense ecosystem of molds and tardigrades, water bears, along with numerous other unknown species, some of which do not neatly fit within existing categories. The entire ecosystem has created a balanced atmosphere and seems to have stemmed from the original contents of the water, air, and the assistant. In light of this test, containment procedures have been updated to include industrial disinfectant. Contents: none. Doors removed from microwave for duration of this experiment. 119 placed in the middle of a large Faraday cage room with freshly painted floor, using the paint that changes color as it dries. Time input 30, power level 3. 119 remotely activated and all testing observed remotely. Resultant paint pattern demonstrated the fall off of radiation from the microwave. The paint closest to the door of the front of the door demonstrated 8 hours of drying, and the furthest section of the floor behind the microwave demonstrated closer to 2 hours of drying. Contents none. Door removed, Faraday page, dried paint. Lightweight floating debris and dust is released into the room through a vent. 119 is remotely activated and all testing observed remotely. Pattern of complex air currents reflecting the pattern left by the paint emerges as individual particles float between stronger and weaker radiation. The radiation did not actually apply any force to the particles, but rather affected their momentum in relation to each other, eventually evolving into a detectable air current pattern. Contents: SCP-442. Time input 90, power level 5. 442 continued to keep the correct time during the entire duration, showing 1 minute and 30 seconds of time passing over the course of the experiment. SCP-289, power level 90, in time input 90. Results none. Permission to carry out experiment denied. Not funny. Do we really need to explain why that is a bad idea? You already know exactly what that would do. What is this SCP? Okay, so, bottles of Macallan 12-year Scotch. Time input 60, power level 5. During previous tests, researchers have been joking that they should nuke themselves a drink, and one researcher retrieved a bottle of Macallan from his quarters. The 12-year vintage is relatively inexpensive to obtain, but the 25 and 30-year vintages are considered by some to be the best of all Scotch commercially available. Upon completion of the test, bottle was effectively a 37-year vintage. Intention of tests had been to consume during subsequent tests, but at this point the intent had been heard by a superior who allowed the researchers to keep the bottle as long as they waited until off-duty to consume it. Subsequent testing determined that the results of these experiments were delicious. Dr. Grant. It would seem Dr. Grant is a rather poor whiskey connoisseur, as whiskey does not age outside of the barrel. Your delicious experiment resulted in a 37-year-old bottle of 12-year aged Scotch. Well done. Dr. Darrell. I stand by my initial assessment. Delicious, Dr. Grant. Okay then. So, after the time, microwave, is teleporting paddling pool? Well, it's safe. Due to its importance to the Foundation, SCP-120 is to be kept under video surveillance and armed guards at all times. Any personnel attempting to utilize the item without authorization, and there's supposed to be a Z in authorization, are to be terminated immediately. Dang. It's just a pool, it's just... How important could it possibly be that it requires that? All personnel wishing to use the item are required to submit a filled copy of the application form, document 12023, to facility operators. Due to the precise timing and coordination required for efficient use of this object in an emergency, all personnel entering 120's building are placed under temporary command of the facility heads, Captain Blank, Security Detachment Level 4, and Dr. Blank, Research Team Level 4. All destination locations are to be kept under surveillance and armed guard. They are valuable to the Foundation, but are non-critical, but any compromised destination must be immediately reported to 120 personnel. Distributed Task Force Sigma-6 Puddle Jumpers was created with the objective of protecting and maintaining 120's facility and location outposts. It consists of one command unit and one defense and maintenance unit based at 120 facility at Command Blank. 5 units based at the destination locations, plus 5 reserve units for these, and 5 units assigned to other 120 related products. Description: SCP-120 appears to be a small child's paddling pool, pastel pink in coloration, with an inner diameter of approximately 2.5 meters and inner height of 0.3 meters. The pool appears to have been fabricated from common earth plastics, but has shown itself to be indestructible by any attempted means. See Research Report 12032 for full summary. Okay. The pool structure and response to pressure are typical for such a pool. It will flex when pressure is applied and is soft to the touch, but has amazing tensile strength and cannot be permanently stretched or ripped. What is contained within the pool seems to be a brightly glowing, colored, liquid-like substance, which seems to exist only partially in our dimension. It is unresponsive to manipulation by organic or inorganic means, but the substance ripples and shimmers systemically and regularly, suggesting it exists physically on another dimension. 120's most interesting and useful property is used regularly by Foundation personnel. Human beings, when alive and carrying loads, including clothing, under 37.8 kilograms, are observed to fall through the pool and are deposited at one of 11 destinations. These will be detailed in an addendum. The item will only function in this way if certain conditions are met. The subject must be genetically human. The subject must be conscious. They must be carrying weights of under the specified amount. And only one subject must be present on the surface. Test subjects attempting to use 120 while these conditions were not met reported their feet making contact with a smooth surface underneath the liquid, but no significant effects were observed. 120's main use is as a potential means of evacuation for Command Blank during a major emergency. It is currently stored and maintained in a fortified outbuilding of this facility. To inspect evacuation procedures, refer to Document 12022. 120 was first brought to the attention of Foundation authorities on August 31st, 1992. Local police authorities in Blank, California were investigating reports of missing children in their jurisdiction and discovered and reported the item on August 31st. Overwatch Command was automatically informed through the usual channels, and a small team of Foundation agents were dispatched to claim and transport the item to Site-19, where it has remained for testing over the next 2 years. Where it remained. It was retransferred to its present location at Command Blank in 1994. Addendum: Document 127, destructive test results for 120. None of these worked. Document 12010, detailed explanation of 120's capabilities and destinations. Location 1, the Pacific Ocean. Location 2, Greenland. Location 3, located at the Earth-Moon Lagrange Point 3. Oh, it has different colors. Blue glow when connected to the Pacific Ocean. Bright white when connected to Greenland. Black for this. Their effectively lost as a retrieval is impossible at our current level of technology. They may prove a possible way to remove small but threatening SCP objects, but for now are merely an inconvenience. A sacrifice of D personnel is required to move the SCP to its next configuration. Location 4, the Himalayas. White glow similar to Location 2. L5, identical to Location 3, will glow yellow. Sahara Desert will glow yellow. Gobi, brown. L2, identical to Location 3, although shows more potential for SCP disposal being situated beyond the moon. Mare Imbrium? Subdued gray glow when dialed into this surface. This destination is on a relatively flat section of the Sea of Rains on the lunar surface. Through vast expenditure of money and D-Class personnel, a small outpost has been established there, and is considered one of the Foundation's safest locations. L4, identical to Location 3, L1, identical to Location 3. So the pool seems to be really, really good at sending people to the moon. Interesting. Next up is the Concrete Cradle. What are these things? What? Is that a floating house? Containment Site 83 has been established outside 121 to house personnel dedicated to the containment of 121. The perimeter of 121 is to remain fenced off from the surrounding area, with guards stationed along the perimeter at all times. Guards are to don local military uniforms and remain heavily armed at all times. Rotation of guards is to occur every 4 hours. The surrounding population is to remain informed that SCP-121 is quarantined due to persisting hazardous material. Warning signs are to be placed 75, 50, and 25 kilometers out along roads leading to 121 to deter trespassers. Civilians who approach the perimeter of 121 are to be reminded of the quarantine and forced to depart. Those who resist are to be detained for questioning. In the event that approaching civilians witness an active instance of 121-1 or 2, Class A amnestics are to be administered. Any meteorological data regarding 121's anomalous effect is to be censored, and 121 has been labeled a no-flight zone to prevent knowledge of 121, 1, and 2. Site Task Force Iota 71 Homewreckers has been established and permanently assigned to Containment Site 83 in response to the threat of 121-2. They are to escort researchers interested in studying non-hostile instances of 121-2, as well as neutralize any instances that have grown to potentially lethal sizes. In the event of an attempted containment breach, Iota 71 is to assist perimeter guards in the neutralization of the instance of 121-2. Any buildings within 121 that develop into 121-1 are to be recorded and monitored at all times for transition into 121-2. 121-2 that became innately hostile upon transition are to be neutralized. However, passive instances may continue to dwell within the perimeter of 121 for research purposes until they've grown to a size too dangerous to contain or become hostile, at which point they are to be neutralized. Okay. 121 is... How is this concrete cradle? I was thinking concrete cradle like a baby cradle. 121 is the region of land occupied by the former town of Blank, Colorado. The town was home to roughly 6,800 prior to the enactment of current containment protocol and holds roughly 3,000 buildings, both residential and commercial. Clouds above 121 appear incapable of entering an area of roughly 12 kilometers in diameter, instead passing around the area. It is speculated this is related to 121's range of effect, but it is not known how at this time. Buildings in 121 will sporadically, not more than one at a time, within 3 weeks minimum between manifestation. Click to scroll to footnotes. Detach from any foundations and ascend into the air. At this point, these buildings are identified as SCP-121-1. Instances of 1211, 1211, ascend to a random height of minimum 45 meters. Regardless of the previous state of the building, doors and windows become locked and any potential entryways have become barricaded by furniture inside. Grown instance? Oh, that's the other thing. Forced entry has shown an increased ambient temperature of roughly 35 degrees Celsius and a relative humidity of roughly 65%, but a lack of any further anomalous properties. And how hot is that? That is... Okay, Rick and Morty's not what I'm looking for. 35. 95 degrees if you try to open the door. Alrighty then. Now we know. Instances of 1211 will cease suspension after a minimum period of 10 weeks. I'll probably stop calling it 1211 since there's actually an SCP-1211 somewhere that I will probably never see. Instances do not show any of the abnormal levels of... Oh yeah, I passed some things. Instances of blah blah blah. 10 weeks, but remain airborne for no more than 15 weeks afterwards. Instances do not show any abnormal levels of durability, and near total destruction of 121-1 upon impact with the ground is common. After impact, the remains of 121-1 will contain an ovoid object approximately 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters by 2 meters, composed of materials consistent with furniture found inside the home. What does this say? Examination of mostly intact instances of 121-1 showed absence of previous furnishings. The object will begin to locomote on its own accord. At this point, it will be referred to as 121-2. 121-2 begin to form a conglomerate with nearby materials including debris from 121-1, flora, automobiles, and on rare occasion, other buildings. 2 will continue to attract objects until it forms a body of material 9 meters in height, at which point the body will animate and appear to take on levels of sentience. 2 may, at this point, begin to simulate ingesting other material to continue growing at a considerably slower rate. Ingestion appears to be this for the sole purpose of continued growth, as instances have gone prolonged periods of time without material. Certain items have been known to attach to 2 instantaneously despite size and the lack of simulated ingestion. Instances of 2 normally resemble animals capable of locomotion on land, but have been known to take on humanoid forms and forms that do not resemble any known animal. They are primarily docile and normally do not display hostility towards personnel unless provoked. However, 2 instances have been known to form with innate aggressive and territorial behavior. This behavior has also been observed to develop following the accumulation of certain items including firearms, bladed weapons, and, in one example, the taxidermy head of a bear. 121 came to the attention of the Foundation when local authorities were flooded with reports of a previously abandoned residence suddenly flying into the sky. The town was evacuated under the guise of a hazardous material spill, and the residence was observed. Once the instance of 1 transitioned into 2, 2 was quickly neutralized. Following the neutralization, another instance of 1 developed. This is the only occasion on which the creation of 1 has so closely followed the creation of an instance of 2. And the town was permanently evacuated and contained. Incident 121A. In November 4th, 1998, a sound described as a muffled siren was heard for approximately 5 minutes. An active instance of 121-1 was suddenly subject to an immense force following the sound, causing the building to prematurely break apart while suspended before the 10-week minimum. Neighboring towns reported hearing the sound. Local press were informed quarantine staff were being evacuated due to a temporary elevation in toxic levels. The cause of the sound is currently unknown. Further research is recommended. 3 weeks following the sound and the destruction of SCP-121-1, the remains finally fell to the ground. Inside the rubble were remnants of the ovoid object found in 121-2, along with traces of aluminum slag. 121-B incident. On May 9, 2012, a 1991 Dodge Caravan was found suspended 53 meters in the air. Internal surveillance is at this time impossible due to the windows being obscured by what appears to be wool cloth. Further observation of the vehicle is recommended. Okay. Sounds strange. So, I don't understand why that's called the concrete cradle, like, at all. But okay. No more monsters. Keter? What? What? Did I click the right one? I clicked the right one. Okay. Okay. 122 is to be stored in a standard containment chamber containing a single electrical outlet. No personnel dormitories are to be constructed within 500 meters of the containment area. At no time should 122 enter an unpowered state. Several redundant power systems are to be maintained and inspected regularly. In the event of a 122-1 manifestation, 35 members of site personnel assigned to enact containment are to be deployed outside the containment chamber. If it becomes hostile, Procedure 99 Renmar is to be enacted. To enact Procedure 99 Renmar, all subjects are to assume specific positions in and around the containment chamber in order to prevent a containment breach. 2 subjects are to man a portable generator with which the equipment used in Procedure 99 Renmar is powered. 3 subjects are to be equipped with chemical irritants created as a byproduct of SCP-1837, which has been found to have an inhibitory effect on 122-1 instances. After all instances of 122-1 have been reduced to the point where entry is safe, 5 subjects are to enter the containment chamber and use an electrical extension cord from the generator to return 122 to a powered state. These personnel are to be considered irrecoverable after entering 122's containment chamber due to its effect. The remaining personnel are redundant. They will take the place of any incapacitated personnel. 122 is a children's nightlight in the design of a stylized shooting star. When it is in a powered state, 122 lets off between 14 to 20 lux. So it's not that bright. No manufacturer's mark is present on or within 122's components. When in an unpowered state, 122 will affect all subjects within a 500-meter radius of its location. When the subjects enter REM sleep, they will move into a comatose state in which they will remain until 122 is resupplied with power. While comatose, humanoid figures appearing to be composed of a black, slightly translucent mass will appear from any shadows around the subject. These figures are hereafter known as instances of 122-1. Instances of 1 exhibit signs of sapience and sentience, with physical abilities roughly equivalent to the affected subjects. They will attempt to locate as many human subjects as possible and expose them to 122's effect. As more subjects are affected by 122, its radius of effect will expand, with the maximum range seen in testing being over 2.7 kilometers. The 1 instances will attempt to gather all sleep aids within the area of effect and apply them to the subjects. These objects have included insomnia medication, traditional medicines known to be used as treatment with insomniacs, pillows, blankets, mattresses, and bed frames. Media such as lullabies. When in a powered state, 122 will affect the sleep patterns of all subjects within its radius. If a subject awakens from a state of REM sleep while within 122's radius, they will display signs of insomnia and will complain of unusual dreams. Let's see. It used to say, these dreams have been found to cause minor psychological disturbances and all personnel should be given weekly psychological evaluations. But it then says, see Incident 122-1. 122 was discovered within the Lionel Children's Hospital on blank 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 after several reports of 122-1 manifestations reached locally embedded agents. When the area was investigated, it was found that all subjects within the building had been affected by 122. Recovered documents indicate that a patient brought 122 when being admitted. However, no record of the patient's identity has been found. Agents secured 122 with a portable power source and it was transferred to Site 19. Addendum 122-B. 122 reclassified to Keter following Incident 121-1. Moved to Armed Reliquary Containment Area 2. Let's see what that incident was. On blank blank blank, 11 instances of 1 breached containment, causing the death of over blank members of site personnel and blank casualties. Following recontainment operations, 122's containment procedures were put under review. During this review, security footage of several maintenance personnel tampering with 122's chamber lock was discovered. When questioned, the subjects claimed that they had done so under duress, saying that a canary was not allowing them to sleep until they released 122. Affected subjects were given Class A amnestics and containment procedures were revised. Upgrade to Keter requested. Okay. Keter seems like a bit much for that. Like, okay, yeah, it caused the death of blank members and blank casualties. But Keter seems like a bit much. Okay, so, last one I'm going to do for this episode, depending on how long it is, I might not even do this. Contain miniature black hole. Yeah, okay, yeah, we can do this. Image of 123 shortly before properly securing sphere to table. It's Euclid. Understandable. 123 is to be held in a secured facility and is to be securely fastened to the top of a sturdy table by use of straps, chains, a net, or similar device. Not sure what counts as a similar device to a net, but absolutely no hook shall be fashioned to the device. The object and table should be centrally located in a room no smaller than 5 meters by 5 meters by 5 meters. No sensitive measuring devices should be used within 100 meters of 123, as their measurements will be noticeably affected, as black holes are wont to do. More significantly, absolutely no object should be inserted into 123 except under experimental conditions, so don't put your finger in it, you won't get it back. Transfer of 123 shall be made with care, and effort made to prevent the object from being shaken or jerked with notable force. 123 shall not, under any circumstances, be transported over large bodies of water by any method, so don't chuck it. No personnel below level 2 must be allowed in the containment chamber with 123. Any person interacting with the object should wear tight-fitting clothing that has absolutely no straps, laces, or other dangling components. Persons with long hair shall be required to tie their hair back or wear a hairnet. These containment procedures don't really seem to mesh with a black hole. But let's see what the description is and maybe we'll find out why. Object is a gray geodesic circle, 65 centimeters in diameter, consisting of 60 triangles. Okay then. The areas between these triangles are empty, allowing the center of the sphere to be seen. Okay, I did say it right. This felt like I said it wrong. The material of the sphere is composed of its unknown, and upon the recommendation of Dr. Somebody, research into the material composition shall be limited to visual observation until further notice. 123 appears to weigh about 3.62 kilograms, though its actual mass is believed to be much higher, again, as black holes are wont to do. The geodesic sphere is hollow, save for the very center. At the center of 123 is what appears to be a black sphere, approximately 1 millimeter in diameter. No light can be seen being reflected off or emitted from the black sphere. The core also appears to exhibit a significant gravitational force, which massively increases within the confines of the outer geodesic sphere. This gravitational force can be measured using sensitive instruments several dozen meters away. Within approximately 3 meters, the gravitational pull is apparent to any observer, with dangling objects beginning to be pulled towards the sphere. At the surface of the outer sphere, the gravitational pull doubles the weight of any object placed onto the structure. The inner sphere's qualities are apparent when any small object is inserted within the outer sphere. Any such object quickly accelerates into the object and disappears. Any liquid poured into the object is also sucked into the central sphere. Analysis has shown that light that nears the black sphere is curved towards the center. The amount of gravity exhibited by the inner sphere at its surface suggests that its mass is approximately 10 to the 29th kilograms, though the obvious gravity-reducing effect within the outer sphere means that its actual mass may actually far exceed even that. Note that such a mass would ordinarily imply a Schwarzschild radius in the order of 200 meters, way in excess of the approximate 0.5 millimeters actually observed, which can be considered further testament to the outer sphere's gravity-dampening qualities. Gases are affected by the gravity of 123, and the atmosphere pressure at its surface has been measured at 205, whatever that is. However, gases are unable to penetrate the area between the triangles of the outer geodesic sphere. The reason for this is currently unknown and is currently being studied. It should be noted that the outer sphere and inner sphere appear to act as one. Whenever the outer sphere is moved, the inner sphere follows. Further research has suggested into the nature of this relationship. Addendum SCP-123-A. 123 has been suggested as a disposal unit. The researcher currently in charge of 123, Dr. Somebody, is concerned about the structural integrity of the geodesic sphere. All requests for disposal must go through Dr. Somebody or request a formal hearing with Level 4 personnel. Until further notice, all interaction with 123 is to be restricted to experimentation. Command personnel agree that further research is needed to understand the durability of the outer sphere. The fact that it hasn't destroyed the world yet should say something about it. Also, where is the black sphere? Is it the little itty-bitty hole right there? How small did they say the little bitty hole was? 1 millimeter in diameter. Yeah, so I think it's that little itty-bitty dot right there. I think I've added the ability for the mouse to be seen in my videos. So right there. Actually. Right there. That little itty-bitty black dot. That's the black hole. It will take your fingers. Be careful. So, that about does it for this episode. Let me see how many I've done so far before I say the number wrong. Okay, so this is going to be episode 38 of Let's Read the SCP Foundation Wiki. I will probably never find a faster way to say that. In the next episode, we will check out Fertile Soil, Contagious Reflection, Invisible Friend, The Living Gun, probably Kinetic Energy Entity, maybe possibly Progressive Fungal Infection, however far I get in 40 minutes. This one was 49 minutes, because I had to do that one part of 106 first. So, thank y'all for watching. If you liked it, give me a like or maybe even a subscribe. That'd be groovy, then you'd know when I do more videos. I try to do 2 a day, but if not 1 a day. So, thank y'all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Later!